Viewers, welcome to a new portion of the show of Team K called Video Game Conspiracies. This is where I'm going to ask you, yes you, ladies and gentlemen, so this means I'm never going to make another video of this, to send me conundrums in the world of video gaming, and I will try and decipher them. Now today, because obviously you can't send me one instantly, I'm going to research something that a few of you may know about, chiefly named Lavender Town Syndrome. Now, during the first few days of the release of Pokemon Red and Green in Japan, back in February 27th of 1996, a peak of deaths appeared in the ages group of 10 to 15, which is kind of creepy. Now, the creepiness is, in the first edition of the Lavender Town theme, it said that only young children and teens could hear the certain binaural tones that were contained in the song. And it was fully developed human ears could not hear it, so, yeah. Now, the phenomenon of the Lavender Town tone is a legend that involves a bizarre spate of medical cases and deaths from around the country that have been connected to the Pocket Monsters series of games, in particular the first two games of the series. Now, whilst I don't actually believe this story is true, there is some evidence that the binaural tones do actually give headaches and other things, because I listened to it and I got a headache, and I also did an experiment on a few other people. CST didn't get affected at all, so his ears might have been a bit more advanced than mine, and another member of Team K, Connor, got addicted to the song. However, I don't know if this is true, but over the internet there is said there is at least one case of pain-related suicide attributed to this song, as a child who, well, obviously could hear the binaural tones, got addicted to the song and listened to it for 24 hours straight, causing himself to get, well, a migraine and hemorrhage in the brain, and eventually committed suicide. But although that is according to legend, I do not know if that is true, viewers. So like I said, I don't know if this is true, I'm just like pointing it out there if you want to do a bit of research. But there is evidence of there being binaural tones in there, and there's evidence that like the Game Freak franchise didn't want this being released. Well, shown by the fact that they changed the tone of the music in the in the European releases of Pokemon Red and Blue. Though the event is largely unheard of due to disclosure laws for companies based in the Kyoto prefecture, there is a large amount of information that has been brought into the open by a number of dedicated individuals, which I can't read. Now, history of the game. The first cases of the Lavender Town tone and associated events were reported a few months after the release of Pocket Monsters Red and Green for the handheld Game Boy. These video games were widely popular with children between the ages of 7 and 12, their core demographic, which was no doubt one of the reasons why the Lavender Town tone had the level of severity that it did. In the game, the player takes on the role of a trainer whose task it is to capture, tame, and train wild animals called Pocket Monsters for battle. These games and the two newest additions to the series at that time, Pocket Monsters Gold and Silver, an anime, manga, figurines, a collectible card game, and home console games have resulted in Pocket Monsters actually becoming a multi-billion-dollar franchise. Now, in one part of the game, the trainer comes to a small, out-of-the-way place called Lavender Town. This town is one of the smallest hamlets in the game, aside from the trainer's own hometown, and possesses very few of the services available to the trainer in every other city in the game. Indeed, the location would be unremarkable were it not for the Pokemon Tower, located there, a colossal building that holds the graves of hundreds of deceased Pokemon. It is theorized that because of this location in the game, at least 200 children lost their lives, and many more developed sudden illnesses and afflictions, and this does not consider the vast waves of unreported illnesses or deaths whose cause went unnoticed. Now, this is where I think it goes a bit over the top, because it does say at the end of this article that it was fake and it was made up. This is all just to scare people. However, it is evident that it can cause, well, some problems. I urge you to listen to the music yourself. Be warned, it may cause a headache, because I had a severe headache for about 10 minutes and I didn't really listen to it that long. So other things I would honestly warn, don't listen to it through headphones for too long, and don't attribute any of your deaths to me. This was all just an experiment. Also, one of the things that has been said is that you can't get the full effect of it unless it comes out of the original Game Boy speakers, which had a 4-bit capacity. So I don't know if that is true or not, but I will link a video in the description to the original music so you can hear it, and leave a comment in the comment section below telling me if it did, well, anything to you. Yeah, so history of pathology. It was not until spring/summer of 1996 that the cases that would eventually become linked to the Lavender Town tone began to surface. The earliest record of the acknowledgement of the effects of the Lavender Town tone, that sounds odd for some reason, that the author could find from an internal report made in 1996 by the company Game Freak, which was then leaked by one of its former employees. In it, an employee gives a list of names, dates and symptoms, records of children between the ages of 7 and 12 who had suffered various medical problems as a result of playing Pocket Monsters Red and Green version. Some records are listed, I will list later, with the full listing in Appendix A, which isn't here. Yeah, I'll shut up. It should be noted... No, I'll stop reading that as well. But from the so-called White Hand Sprite, Ghost Animation and Buried Alive model, all of which were visual phenomena that provoked similar but distinct symptoms. Some of the symptoms were, April 12, 1996, one of the incidents was obstructive sleep apnea, severe migraines, otihagra and tinnitus, which is like bleeding in the ears, I think, or something with the ears. Another one was general irritability, insomnia, addiction to video games, nosebleed, and it developed into violent streaks against others and eventually himself. Cluster headaches, irritability, eventually took mixed painkillers. Migraine, sluggish and slow behaviour, unresponsive, developed into deafness and went missing. And the body was discovered at the side of the road April the 20th, 1996. Now, the document that was circulated internally was the first time that these incidents had been connected with the Pocket Monsters video games. Until then, the cause had not been discovered or diagnosed by medical professionals. Indeed, it is uncertain how the company themselves managed to find the cases related to the event without seeking advice from health services. The predominant symptoms related to what would now be known as Lavender Town included headaches and migraines, bleeding from ears and eyes, mood swings and irritability, addiction to the games, unprovoked violence, withdrawal symptoms, and unresponsiveness, and in approximately 67% of cases, suicidal tendencies. However, these symptoms only manifested in children between the ages of 7 and 12, who had reached the area in the game known as Lavender Town. Now, if any of you have ever heard of a iPod app known as Mosquito, it is actually emits a high-pitched frequency which people over the age of 20, because their ears have developed, or I don't know if it's developed or regressed, it's one of the two, they actually can't hear it, but it is still proven that people from up to 20 can still hear it. So I know people may say that, oh, well, you're not between 7 and 12, so you might not have got the full symptoms. However, ears don't fully develop until the 20, so I would still be able to hear it, seeing as I can still hear the Mosquito app. So, yeah. I just thought I'd tell you that. As it turns out, the developers of the Lavender Town area had sought to make an area that would leave an impression on the player. The Pokemon Tower is a visible result of that. And the fact that Lavender Town is so different from all the other cities in the game. It is smaller, has fewer people in it, and of course there is no gym. And the music was very, very eerie. I mean, even in the changed versions in the recent releases, in the European releases, I still found the music quite creepy. In fact, the first version of the game, we were told, was told to slightly change the song played in the background because our manager told us it would make children upset. The music used in subsequent versions is different. What Seki failed to disclose to Games Dimension magazine was that the music used in the first release of Pocket Monsters Red and Green was formulated out of an experiment in binaural beats, using several different frequencies of sound, each frequency played in one ear through earphones or headphones. Various psychological effects can be induced upon the listener. In most versions of the first wave release, this resulted in players feeling uneasy, apprehensive, and mildly disturbed. However, upwards of 200 children, it provoked a variety of disturbances in the brain that went undetected purely because it was undetectable by fully developed human ears. Instead, only children fell victim to the tones, resulting in psychological and physiological problems that in some cases led to death, and many of which of these were suicides. And now we get the visual overview. Now, I know this bit isn't true, but Jesus Christ, it's quite freaky. These visual effects are known among the programming circles as the White Hand Sprite, the Ghost Animation, and the Buried Alive model. Each has been found to cause headaches, nausea, and in severe cases, hemorrhaging of the brains and lungs. While around 70% of Lavender Town syndrome is due to the lavender tone, the remaining percentage is split among these visual phenomena. This is partly due to the visual stimuli occurring after the player is introduced to the lavender tone. It has been theorized that those unaffected by the oral stimulation, such as the deaf or the hard of hearing, make up the remaining 30%. While viewing these models can cause these effects, there are certain methods that allow a viewer to safely examine them in detail. The White Hand Sprite. Known in the code as whitehand.gif, this was scripted to appear as a Pokemon on the third floor of the Lavender Tower. It is divided into 4 separate animations: an introduction, the cry, a Pokemon releases before a battle, an idle, and 2 attacks. These attacks are unknown, as they are simply listed as fist and brutal. While viewing the animation, has been proven to be hazardous. Viewing the frames of the model has been proven to have no adverse effects. The white hand is depicted as a shriveled, slightly decayed hand, with surprising attention to detail. Flesh is peeling from the back of the bone, and several tendons dangle realistically out of the wrist. The first attack is the hand bailing into a fist, then swinging forward. However, the brutal animation is missing several frames. The hand seems to open up, then cuts out. After a few seconds, it reappears, closed again. No record has ever been found of these missing frames. Ghost animation. The ghost animation, coded as haunting.swf, was intended to be placed in several areas throughout the tower, including in the centre of a path on the second floor. However, players cannot interact with it, leaving many to believe that it was intended as a background feature. The ghost animation, as well, must be viewed in individual frames. It's comprised of 59 frames total. However, after extraction, around half of these frames have been revealed to be the standard ghost model used in Pocket Monsters. Around a quarter of the remaining frames are composed of static to produce a fading effect. However, interspersed with these bursts of static are several frames of screaming faces, along with images of a skeletal man in a cloak, hypothesized to be the Grim Reaper, and of several dead corpses. The meaning behind these are unknown. While under oath before the Video Games Commission Board, lead programmer Hisashi Sogabe, whatever, I can't pronounce Japanese names for some reason, testified as to having no knowledge where these images surfaced, I can't even read English words now. Out of all the phenomena associated with Lavender Town syndrome, this animation is the most speculated on. In his thesis, Video Games and the Manipulation of the Human Mind, Dr. Jackson Turner argued that the images were intentionally placed in. Due to the brief time appearing on the screen and the graphic nature of the frames, Turner theorized that these were meant to subliminally influence the player and make them more frightened around their surroundings. Now, this is the freakiest one. I mean, I know it's not real, but this freaked me out for a while. And honestly, it would be really good for, like, a horror game to put this in. I don't know if they'll be able to do it, but anyway, I'll show up. The Buried Alive model, often referred to as its code, the Berryman script. The Buried Alive model was to be found on the final story of the Pokemon Tower, in what has now been replaced with the Marowak Ghost. According to the scripts assigned to it, the Buried Alive model was intended to be the boss of the tower. Once reaching the top floor, the following conversation would have taken place. You're here. I'm trapped, and I'm lonely, so very lonely. Won't you join me? After this, the battle will be initiated. Once in battle view, the Buried Alive model appears to be a decaying human corpse attempting to crawl out of the ground. It has been programmed to have 2 white hands, a Gengar, and a Muck. Strangely enough, a protocol for the Buried Alive's actions after it was defeated was never written. In the case of the player defeating him, the game would freeze. However, a specific ending was written by an unknown programmer upon losing the battle. In this ending, the Buried Alive was to have stated, "Finally, fresh meat," followed by several lines of gibberish. He was then said to have dragged the player character into the ground surrounding him. The scene would finish with a typical game over screen. However, in the background, an image of the Buried Alive character devouring the player was to have been shown. Especially strange are the protocols for after this scene. The cartridge was to download this image to the small internal memory contained in the Game Boy, overwriting the title screen that normally accompanied a Game Boy turning on. Instead, when it was started, the player would view this image as the Game Boy switched on, as the sound file staticmesh.wav would be played. The intended purpose for this effect, unlike many of the other factors leading towards Lavender Town syndrome, is unknown. And oh yes, it is a work of fiction. Now, whilst this is a work of fiction, especially with the visual stimuli, it is evident that there were problems with the Lavender Town theme as a whole when it first came out in Japan, and there may have been reports of headaches and stuff, because it is evident that something went wrong, seeing as though the fact they had to change the overall sound for the European release. Otherwise, they would have just left it the same way it was. I hope you've enjoyed the first episode of Video Game Conspiracies. I can't even say the name of my own title. Anyway, please leave a message in the comment section below if you've heard this music and heard about Lavender Town syndrome, and saying if I've got anything wrong. Also, please send me a private message or send me a comment saying what else I should look into video games, see what conspiracies I can find, and tell them to you, all my 3 viewers. Anyway, this is Geezer from Team K signing off, and I do hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope it's been informative.